Hello everyone and welcome to the first game we'll be showing from round 12 of this year's FIDE Candidates Tournament, Hikaru Nakamura versus Alireza Firouzja. In the previous half of the candidates, Hikaru defeated Alireza, and he also comes into the match with a plus score against Alireza. He has 2 wins against him and 2 draws. Hikaru never lost to Alireza, and also Hikaru is on a bit of a winning streak. In the last 4 rounds, he won 3 games against Caruana, against Nijad, and against Pregnananda. And Alireza, okay, not having the best event, but he did beat Nijad Abbasov with that brilliancy miniature in the previous round. So, okay, anything can still happen. Let's check it out. We even have a nice photo of the matchup, so let's enjoy that before we check out the game. A few moves have been played. As you can see, Hikaru with his I believe that's Starbucks cup, but not really sure. And Alireza stopped wearing colorful shirts as soon as he started playing well, obviously. So let's check it out. Hikaru with the white pieces opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to e6, d4, d5, and already a surprise on move 3. Usually knight to c3 or advancing the pawn to e5 is played, sometimes knight to d2, but here just e captures on d5. The exchange French, and you all know what Mikhail Tal said about playing the exchange French. So okay, e captures on d5, we have knight to f3, bishop to d6 and pawn to c4. And okay, here there are a couple of options that you could go for, like d captures on c4. Also, you could play pawn to c6 to defend the d5 pawn, make room for the bishop on c7 if c5 is advanced. But Alireza goes for knight to f6, and he invites pawn to c5, which Hikaru goes for. Now, it's a very, very rare position. Magnus Carlsen had it once in 2016 in the Olympiad. He played it against Julio Catalino Sadora, and he only managed a draw with this pawn to c5 move. But okay, bishop to e7, and now Magnus continued knight to c3 in that game. We have a queen to a4 with check by Hikaru. Okay, bishop to d7, nothing wrong with this. You could also play other moves. You could play knight to c6, you could block with c6, bishop to d7 is also perfectly fine. And queen back to d2. We have castles by Alireza, and now bishop to e3. There is one game where bishop to d3 was played. Here, Hikaru wants bishop to e3, and it is now, as of move 9, that we have a completely new game. So okay, knight to c6, Alireza continues development, knight to c3, Hikaru doesn't bother with pawn to a3 to stop knight to b4, so just knight to c3. Pawn to b6, always a good idea when you have this advanced setup to challenge the more central pawn with the less central pawn. Bishop to e2, continuing development, preparing to castle, and now knight to b4. Attacks the white queen, queen to d2, and bishop to f5, going for knight to c2 check to win some material. So rook to c1 by Hikaru and knight to g4. Alireza goes after the bishop on e3, bishop to f4, keeping it and also putting some nasty pressure on that c7 pawn. So b captures on c5, we have d captures on c5, and now bishop captures on c5. As you can see, Hikaru sacrificed a pawn here, and the time on the clock is fairly similar, an hour and 27 minutes versus an hour and 20 minutes. I wouldn't really say that Alireza is surprised, but okay, you do see some possibilities of winning back your material. We have castles by Hikaru, and now rook to e8. So where is Hikaru's compensation here? Well, he goes in for another 15-minute thing, and he plays pawn to a3. Now, an hour and 11 minutes versus Alireza's 57 minutes gives Alireza a deadly dare. Do you move the knight? Do you play something else? Maybe pawn to d4 is a move, or do you play knight captures on f2? Now, we're going to discuss knight captures on f2 as it requires discussion. Knight captures on f2 would be met with rook captures on f2, and now you play rook captures on e2. That's the good stuff. Point is that you can't really take with the queen. If you take with the queen, then just knight to d3, attacks the rook on c1, attacks the rook on f2 twice, and also attacks the undefended bishop on f4. So this would be very good for black. So what you would have to do after this rook captures on e2 move is knight captures on e2, now putting pressure on the bishop on c5. So bishop captures on f2, king captures, and now knight to d3 with check. King to g3, king to g1 also possible, king to g3 is just better. Knight captures on c1, queen captures, putting pressure on that c7 pawn, and now rook to c8. And the point is that if black can play c5, then everything is perfectly fine. Maybe black would even be better. But after something like knight f to d4, going after the bishop, and the bishop moving, b4 will be played, stopping c5, and black will be left with this weak c7 pawn for pretty much the rest of the game. But it can be played. It's a nice position. Alireza would have a rook for bishop and knight, and yeah, it can be played, or rather a rook for two knights, and it can be played. But Alireza plays pawn to d4. It's an even stronger move. It is the top move recommended by the engine, and let's see what Hikaru had in mind here now. He doesn't capture on b4, although even that can be played. He plays knight to b5, which is even stronger. He goes after the c7 pawn, and now pawn to d3. Again, Alireza plays the top move, and now Hikaru plays rook captures on c5. And why wouldn't he? Both of the bishops seem to be on a path for that rook to just capture. Objectively stronger would have been to just move the bishop to d1. And now, okay, the c7 pawn is hanging. You're going to play knight a6. Now you play knight captures on c7, knight captures, and rook captures on c5. You put pressure on the knight here, and once the knight moves to d5, attacks the bishop, doesn't really matter where you put the bishop, then you go something like knight g2 f6, and everything is perfectly fine. However, after Hikaru's move, rook captures on c5, everything is still perfectly fine, but maybe Alireza can get the upper hand here. D captures on e2, and now rook to e1. Just getting the rook out of harm's way, and now knight to d3, attacking the rook and attacking the bishop on f4. Rook captures on f5, and now knight captures on e1. And here, with this knight captures on e1 move, Alireza messes up a little bit. Here, the real move was queen to d7, going after the two pieces here, and after you attack, let's say rook c5, you have to keep the knight defended, rook a to d8, and now okay, you could capture on c7, but you can't capture with the rook, otherwise the knight falls. So you have to play with the bishop. Bishop captures on c7, knight captures on c5, bishop captures on d8. Let's say bishop captures, queen captures on b5, and now you move the bishop, and the game continues. It's still perfectly fine. Alireza will have this passed pawn on e2. The material is equal. So, you definitely can be played. But after knight captures on e1, it is Hikaru who gets the upper edge. He plays knight captures on e1. Maybe Alireza thought that if queen captures, he can infiltrate with queen to d3, just activate the queen, attack the knight, attack the rook. But Hikaru just played knight captures on e1, and Alireza trades the queens off. Queen captures, bishop captures, and now rook a to d8. Goes after the bishop on d2, with the e2 pawn still nicely defended. But now bishop to c3 by Hikaru, and rook to d1. Putting pressure on the knight, and the problem is how do you play this? The threat was rook to g5, attacking the knight and of course the g7 pawn. But now if you play it now knight to e5, defends very nicely. f6 is next, and the bishop is overloaded. If you take here, then of course rook captures on e1 will be checkmate. So after rook to d1, pawn to f3. Very nice move by Hikaru. Attacks the knight, gives the king the f2 square. Knight to e3, and now knight captures on c7. We have rook to e7, chasing away the knight. Rook to c5, nicely defending. We have pawn to f6, limiting the power of the bishop, also giving the king some more breathing room, and bishop to b4, threatening all sorts of nasty discoveries here, while still keeping an eye on everything. So king to f7, and now pawn to h4. We have pawn to h5, and Hikaru plays king to f2. And with this king to f2 move, he sort of allows Alireza to get back into the game, and as you can see, the time on the clock is really crazy. It's only moved 30, 10 more moves need to be made to reach time control. Hikaru with 16, Alireza with 5 minutes on the clock for those 10 moves. And here, the problem is with this king to f2 move, if Alireza finds rook captures on e1, he will have excellent chances of saving the game. Because after rook captures on e1, bishop captures on e1, there's knight to d1 with check, winning the b2 pawn. And now after king to g3, as the d2 pawn is defended, you will play knight captures on b2. Yeah, it's just a very nice position. Knight to d3 being the threat, going after the rook and the bishop. Once you defended that, then comes rook to d7. You go after the bishop, and for the moment, Hikaru would be up a piece, but there's just no good way of actually saving it. Let's say knight to b5. knight to d3 goes after the bishop, and the bishop can no longer be saved. If you move the bishop, just pawn to e1 promotes to a queen, and the bishop will have to sacrifice itself. So here you give up the rook, and now after rook captures on d3, you have rook versus knight and bishop. But it's just gonna be a draw. King f2 will still pose problems, will probably eliminate the e2 pawn, but still it should be enough for a draw. However, after this king to f2 move, Alireza played rook to b1, wanted to go after the b2 pawn, and now Hikaru is just winning, or very, very close to winning, but most likely winning. So just for fun, feel free to pause the video and try to find the move that Hikaru played here, while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the move that solves all of your problems. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is knight to d5. That is the move. You attack the rook, and the rook can't really go just anywhere, as you will also lose the knight on e3. So the problem is, if you trade with knight captures on d5, rook captures also comes with an attack on the rook on e7. And once this rook moves, now you play bishop to c3, and you save your b2 pawn. Your bishop controls both of the rooks. Really, this rook is never entering the game. This rook has no way of entering the game. I mean, it's just winning for white. For example, also h5 is hanging. If you play pawn to g6, then even the rook at the d6 will just put pressure on f6. So everything is falling apart here for black. So Alireza doesn't go for that. He plays knight to d1 with check. We have king to g3, and now rook to e5. This sort of helps out with the defense across the fifth rank. And also, if the rook moves, the knight will be hanging. So here we have knight to d3, attacking the rook, rook back to e8, and now bishop to e1. Here Hikaru was winning by force, but he does have 13 minutes on the clock, so he doesn't want to overpush it, and Alireza has only 2 minutes. So it's better to, you know, force Alireza to think than to burn your time if there really isn't a way out. But I will show it because it's a lot of fun. Rook to c7 with check. And now after the king moves, wherever the king moves is also winning for white, as you're just going to capture the a7 pawn. But if you go to g8, then even knight to e7 check, king to h7, and knight to f5, going after the g7 pawn. And now after knight to e3, which sort of stops rook captures on g7, because once you move the king, both the rook and the knight will be hanging, you will simply capture. And after rook captures, now you play knight to e1, you stop the pawn from being advanced, as Alireza does have it covered by both of the rooks. Now you're just going to continue capturing, and well, everything is winning here for Hikaru. But yeah, you have to calculate a lot here. He just played bishop to e1, stops all of Alireza's counterplay, and says, all right, now you burn time. But Alireza's moves are easy to spot. Knight captures on b2. And okay, rook to b5 stops the knight from capturing knight on d3. Will put pressure on the rook on b1. Now just rook to d1. And what's happening here now? Can you capture the knight on b2? Yes, you can. But should you capture with the knight, then rook captures on e1, and all of a sudden Alireza is winning. So of course you have to capture with the rook. Rook captures on b2. Now comes rook captures on d3, and rook back to b7 with check. This is move 37. Alireza is down to less than a minute to make 3 moves. We have king to f8, precisely played. If you go king to g8, then you're losing the game due to this check. Knight e7 check, king f7, knight to f5 check, and the g7 pawn is a problem. And also if king to g6, saying that, okay, you cannot capture with the rook, then king f4, and the king is getting checkmated. Rook captures on g7 will be checkmate, or you go rook to g8 to stop that, and then knight e7 check lands with a beautiful fork here. So after rook b7 check, king to f8, only way to continue, and now comes knight to f4, going after some tricky knight to g6 moves. Rook captures on a3, and now first king to f2. Not rushing anything, this is definitely the way to go. Pawn to a5, Alireza starts advancing his passed pawn, and rook to a7 now. You always have to put the rook behind the passed pawn, and this is Hikaru's 40th move. Alireza has 34 seconds to make his last move to reach time control, and he plays rook to a4. Another idea is, of course, pawn to a5, and then you allow knight captures on h5. But he goes for rook to a4, which attacks the knight, also will put pressure on the h4 pawn, but on the other hand, it leaves his pawn on a5 to be attacked. But he manages to get additional time, and he has a playable position. This is no longer winning for Hikaru. Hikaru plays g3, defends the knight, and already on move 41, upon reaching time control, Alireza blunders the game. He plays pawn to g5. And the way you continue this is you play rook a3 or rook a1 or somewhere. But rook a3 is sufficient. Point being that after the pawn is captured, okay, you capture back. And after king f7, let's say knight captures on e2, it's a bishop and knight versus rook, but it's 3 pawns on the king's side, so you're not winning this with white. However, after g3, Alireza wanted to play for the win. He played pawn to g5. He gives up a pawn here on the king's side for some active play, but it doesn't work. H captures on g5, f captures, knight captures on h5, and now we have rook to e5. The pawn on a5 is defended, and of course Alireza is now hoping to play rook to a1 and continue pushing that pawn, but the position is completely winning for Hikaru. However, only if you spot a most difficult move to find. Have at it. It is, of course, the move you never even considered, and that is pawn to g4. So congratulations to everyone who found that, and the idea is that you cover the f5 square, not just to prevent rook to f5, but also to allow knight to come to f5, and then the rook, knight, and bishop combo will be just deadly against the black king stuck on the back rank. And to show you why, let's say you played knight to f6, also looks very strong. Then the problem is this rook to f5 move. It's just, what do you do with the knight? Knight h7 check, king to g8, let's say bishop to c3. Looks like you're ready to deliver some nasty ideas, but all of a sudden, rook to a3 comes, attacks your bishop. And now, after rook to g7 check, you will play king to h8, and now you don't have discoveries, as rook captures on c3 is coming. So what do you play here? Bishop to d4, you might think, okay, we'll do discoveries on the next move, it's not a problem. Rook captures on f3 with check, and after king captures on e2, you might think, okay, no more checks, but there's rook to e3, rook f to e3 check, and now there's nothing better, because black will just continue checking the white king along the third rank, or you take, and then king captures rook on g7, knight captures on g5, and again, it's a draw. So that's the problem. So g4 solves all of this, and Hikaru finds it very nicely, and I'm sure once Alireza saw g4 move, he realized that he was in huge trouble. He goes king to e8, we have knight to g7 with check. King to f8, now knight to f5, and this is now officially a monster knight. Rook to a2, now comes rook to a8 with check. There are other moves, but rook to a8 is just sensationally forcing. Rook to a8 check. Another problem is if you just block, then you give up the pawn on a5. So you have to play king to f7. It's your only other legal move. And now comes knight to d6 check, king to e6, and knight to c4 with a fork here, and also nicely connecting with the pawn on a5. And once Alireza loses this a5 pawn, it is all over. Remember, all of that, all of those ideas that Alireza had were to defend the a5 pawn, but now with the a5 pawn gone, it's a game over. Rook to b5 was played, and now Hikaru just eliminates it. Rook captures on a5, rook b captures on a5, and knight captures on a5. King to d5 was played, but now king to e3 by Hikaru, and he was in this position on move 52 that Alireza Firouzja resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Hikaru gets his third win in a row and a fourth win if you consider his 5 previous games. So if you consider the 5 previous games, Hikaru is destroying the field in the FIDE candidates tournament. And now the problem is you will lose both of the pawns. That's the both of these pawns. That's the problem. Let's say you play a move, and there really isn't a move for you to play, as all of these squares are just covered by the white pieces. So the black king is completely cut off. If you move the rook, then of course the e2 pawn will fall. So you could play something like rook to b2 to keep defending it. But now bishop d2 just allows king to capture. Let's say rook back to a2, king captures on e2. Okay, let's say king to d4, but now knight to c6 with check. And again, there's a wall created against the black king, so you cannot do anything here. Also, if you go to d5, then just a nice fork here wins the rook, so you're going to have to play something weird like king to c5, and then knight e5 will just go after the pawn. Let's say king d4, knight f7, and that's it. The pawn falls. So rook a3, a knight captures on g5, and that's it. Now you have 2 connected pass pawns, and of course, it's a completely winning position. So yeah, brilliant stuff by Hikaru. Did not overthink that position where he was winning. He actually just, gave the ball to Alireza, said, okay, you have 2 minutes on the clock, you make your moves. And Alireza was able to do the moves. He reached time control with a playable position, with an equal position. But then, it's just the oldest story in the book. You reach time control and then move 41, where you finally have time to catch your breath. That's where you make your mistake. Happens quite a lot, and it also happened in this game. Now, what does this mean for the FIDE Candidates tournament? I will now also show you the standings, so if you're not interested in results of the other games, as I will also make videos on them, stop watching the video now. But yeah, these are the standings after 12 rounds. Hikaru catches up to the leaders. Now it's Hikaru, Nepo, and Gukesh with 7.5. Fabiano with 7 points. Pragnananda with 6. Vidit with 5. Alireza with 4.5. And Nijat Abbasov with 3 points. So the saga continues. Nijat still without a single win. Nepo, the only player still undefeated. But Hikaru on a winning streak. Can he continue this in the final 2 rounds? It's not going to be easy, because in the final 2 rounds, Hikaru faces Jan Nepomniachtchi and Gukesh. So it's going to be a crazy two final rounds for Hikaru. But yeah, I mean, if you want to win the Candidates tournament, that's definitely how you want to win the Candidates tournament. So facing the 2 co-leaders in the 2 final rounds, it's going to be... well, it's going to be crazy, but again, it could be the best possible story for Hikaru. Win the Candidates tournament on a winning streak, challenge Ding, become world champion. Who knows what will happen. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Another tough loss for Alireza, but a brilliant victory for Hikaru. Very nicely done. I would like to thank Filippo Palazzo, Des de Panama, Isu Papa, Mark Jensen, Andrea Sorcinelli, Johan Bridger, and Jerry Drever for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, but mostly covering the FIDE Candidates tournament. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.